You know, I grew up non-confrontational and always treated this game as a sport where my pen won gold. But these days, the podium has been hard for all of us to ignore, period. I understand that this next chapter may leave you feeling uneasy, but I hope you see my honesty as clarity, not charity, that answers some questions, especially about the unanswered you've been sending me, period. Now, I already know what y'all thinking. Drake's the GOAT, mascot of hip-hop, y'all wasn't thinking that? Oh, my fault. So anyways, as a Drake fan, y'all already know that this next Drake album, I believe, is going to be some of his best work. I believe when rappers go through a tumultuous time, and obviously Drake has had that type of experience, especially in 2024. I don't think a rapper has ever done to another rapper what Kendrick did to Drake. Not Pac to Biggie, not 50, or not Kanye to 50, not 50 to Ja Rule. I believe what Kendrick did to Drake, not even Ice Cube to NWA, can compare to the amount of turmoil that White Tank Top, I always forget his name, what Kendrick did to Drake, as far as verbally mutilating him to the point where now he is suing the label that he is under, and it's very unthinkable because it's a defamation lawsuit for the track that lost him the battle in the Kendrick-Drake war. Now, of course, life has to go on, right? You win some, you lose some, but you indeed have to live to fight another day. Now, the reason I say all this is simply because Drake's next album is going to be a classic. Now, if it's not classic, I'll just come out and say it's not classic, but I ain't gonna lie to you. I don't know if y'all been noticing, but Some Sexy Songs for You has been growing on a lot of people. And for the haters, even Charlamagne, he was like, I'm not even going to speak on the album because I have to be a Drake hater. Now, that should let you know the type of vitriol that some people have towards Drake, whether warranted or not warranted. That's the type of vitriol that they have. I mean, Joseph Anthony Budden literally asked the public, the masses on his ginormous platform, who is out here wearing Nike tights? Because he keeps on emphasizing Drake's infatuation with younger girls. If y'all don't know, Joseph Anthony Budden laid the groundwork for Pusha T and Kendrick to fly. You know how they say you gotta crawl before you walk before you run? Well, Anthony Budden did everything in between to let Pusha T and Kendrick fly off at the mouth and send the most egregious shots ever put on wax towards Aubrey Graham. Now, did Drake ask for it? Of course he did. But we have to realize that Joseph Anthony Budden is the epitome of what Drake's downfall was as far as the rap battle. Because he and his disses towards Drake. Yes, Joseph Anthony Budden used to be a rapper, for those who are young. Joe Budden had some of the most masterful tracks when it came to Drake disses. And bits and pieces of that was used in Kendrick's rebuttal. As far as Pusha T, not as much, because the kid angle was a new thing. We didn't even know about that, right? But as far as Kendrick, he took a lot of things that Joseph said and he used it in his disses towards Drake. I mean, even Rick Ross. And we all know that people sided with Drake on the Rick Ross versus Drake battle, right? Even Rick Ross, the whole surgery angle, as far as his nose and as far as his stomach, Joe Budden said that in his disses towards Drake. Now, of course, if you want to look up the Joe Drake disses, it's going to be kind of hard because I don't think it's really on DSP. Let me see. Drake diss. I mean, he had a bunch of them, right? Making a Murderer, Part 1, Wake, right? I think he made a track titled Just Because, Afraid. Like, he had a lot of things that he put out. But essentially, Wake and Making a Murderer is probably the two tracks you need to listen to. And I think if you're a younger listener, right, and don't even know that Joe Budden used to rap and was probably one of the better ones to do it, they will be pleasantly surprised on the amount of quality that Making a Murderer Part 1 was, and of course Wake. Now, of course, why am I saying all that? Because in the aftermath of this battle, Drake is still battling it out with Kendrick as GNX dethroned Some Sexy Songs for You from #1. If you didn't know, Drake went #1 with Party Next Door in the album Some Sexy Songs for You, which is a phenomenal album to the point where, and I've given it some time, to the point where we may have to put this in the top 5 Drake albums in his discography. Because if you think about it, Party Next Door has been openly the writer for Drake when it comes to a lot of these R&B tracks. Obviously, Drake has his own pen and things of that nature. But Party Next Door, I would say, is like the R&B Quentin Miller to Drake, right? And what Weeknd did for Drake as far as his Take Care album, I think Party Next Door has did for Drake in his entire career. So Party Next Door and Drake having such a classic body of work shouldn't be as of a surprise to a lot of people, because Party Next Door knows how Drake wants to sound, because he's been implementing that sound for the longest. And Drake's been using it for himself, right? It's almost as if Party Next Door is to Drake what The Dream is to Beyonce. But of course, Drake also writes his own tracks, because I'm a Drake fan. I have to defend him. You know what I mean? He do be writing his own tracks to the point where he's made some of the, he's written for Kanye. He's written for Beyonce. Kanye even came out and said he's one of the greatest writers he's ever worked with when referring to Drake. So it's not like this man's pen is just trash. It's, you know, he has a little help on the V's, right? He has a little help. The collaborative effort, right? So anyways, the reason why I say that is because Party Next Door and Drake, Some Sexy Songs for You, went #1, right? Then Kendrick Lamar, GNX came out of nowhere like Superman, just completely dethroned the album, and still to this day is the #1 album in the world, currently selling around 90,000 units, while Party Next Door and Drake sold around 89,000 units. Now I wonder why the discrepancy is so minimal. It's almost as if, let me chill. You know what I mean? The lawsuit going to handle that, right? But let's just say Kendrick's team is phenomenal. His marketing team needs to go up there with the 96, 97 Bulls, because what they are doing as far as performing, they are doing it. Let's just put it like that, right? I'm not accusing anybody of anything. I'm just saying Kendrick is putting on a phenomenal display on what a marketing team could do for your career while already being a superstar in the game, right? So anyways, if you didn't know, Drake is currently putting out another solo album. Now, of course, when I said Some Sexy Songs for You was coming out in 2 weeks and it ended up coming out in like 4 weeks. So technically I was around the mark. But the way I knew that, you know what I mean? The world may never know. Maybe I'm just making stuff up, right? So anyways, Drake is going to put out a solo album this year, right? It's probably going to be towards the tail end of this year. Maybe, you know, there's a certain game that's going to be released, GTA 6, and that has a estimated release date, right? I'm just gonna leave it at that. So anyways, maybe, you know, it may co-align or come around that time, right? I don't know. I'm just making stuff up, honestly. So anyways, Drake also, the main reason I want to get into Drake, pause, is that 2026 FIFA World Cup is coming up, right? And basically the FIFA president Gianni Infantino talked about the idea of Drake headlining the World Cup final halftime show. So there's a lot of different performers, I believe. And basically with the World Cup, Drake's name even being floated about as far as being a performer, you already know what we have to compare that to. Kendrick Lamar performed at the Super Bowl, which is the biggest event in American history as far as entertainment, right? Super Bowl is the biggest event as far as the engagement and things of that nature. So now if you perform at the World Cup, you essentially are now putting yourself on a grand scale that's the world, because now soccer is the most popular sport when the entire earth is involved. Football is the most popular sport when it comes to Americans. So it'd be a pivotal move if Drake ended up performing at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. So that's why I wanted to bring that up. Really nothing too crazy as far as Drake and his run on the charts. Obviously, he has the second most popular album in the world with Some Sexy Songs for You. People think we just talk about Drake for the love of it, right? Like he's not one of the top performers in hip hop. I mean, I've talked about Tate McRae. I've talked about Chino Packers. I've talked about Bollywood artists. I've talked about everybody who impacts the masses, but seemingly is only pointed out when you talk about Drake, right? As far as the continuation or the consistency. So people have to realize that Drake is one of the more popular artists in the world. It's Drake, Taylor Swift, and Bad Bunny, and then it's the rest of the artists, right? Kendrick's having a phenomenal year, but I like to compare Kendrick to Kawhi Leonard. You never know when he's going to go on his 3 to 4 year hiatus, which he literally did before putting out Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers, right? So when it comes to Drake's involvement with FIFA, he basically acknowledged it, and the FIFA president said he should have his number saved, talking about Drake, and the potential to capitalize on the Drake versus Lamar beef could end up happening with Drake headlining the World Cup final halftime show. Now, the first World Cup hosted by Canada, U.S., and Mexico is, set to happen. Yeah, to feature. Okay, so basically, in totality, right? The first World Cup hosted by Canada, U.S., and Mexico, which will have a Super Bowl-esque type halftime show, would be July 19th, 2026. And the audience is expected to be 2 billion with the B viewers. So 2 billion viewers, which is 20x the Super Bowl's reach. I wonder what type of sense that would make for Drake, coming off of what Kendrick just did to him on the Super Bowl halftime show, which is why I criticized the halftime show the way I did. I believe Kendrick should have went through a lot of his classics and then got to Not Like Us, right? Because Not Like Us should have been played. Don't get it twisted. But as far as my coverage of Kendrick's Super Bowl halftime show, if you just type in Super Bowl Analytic Dreamz with a Z, it should pop up my coverage of that. I literally had my own track list because even though I come with complaints about his performance, I had solutions as far as my own track list. And it literally had his classics, and then Not Like Us needed to be sprinkled throughout the track list. But because of his involvement of creating PG Lane, he wanted to have as little TDE tracks as possible, which is why I believe he has 7 to 8 tracks off of GNX. Who in the world wants to hear GNX 6 to 7 times when it's a Super Bowl performance, right? So that was my whole sentiment. And of course, people ran with it. But with that being said, I do believe Drake is going to headline the FIFA World Cup that is set to happen. What was the date again? Set to happen July 19th, 2026. As far as sport books, so Drake is at plus 150 odds to headline, trailing Coldplay at minus 300. So it's not a automatic lock that Drake's going to perform, but it's definitely being teased and thrown around that he may perform at the FIFA World Cup, which I think would be phenomenal. But of course, we have to wait to see what Drake ends up doing with that type of exposure. Like I said, 2 billion viewers will be there for the FIFA World Cup, 20x times the Super Bowl. So, well, that's redundant. 20 times the Super Bowl. So, with that being said, very interesting. Just wanted to break that down because I think Drake headlining the FIFA World Cup final halftime show would be very interesting, and I would be interested to see what discourse comes about that type of performance. So, with that being said, click my link tree in my bio. Let me know on one of my social medias. What do you think about Drake versus Kendrick in general? What do you think about this IG post? This IG post talking about his next album making people feel uneasy. And do you believe that Drake will end up headlining the first World Cup halftime? Do you think Drake will end up headlining the World Cup final halftime show when it ends up happening July 19th, 2026?